Okay, and then let's go ahead and apply some rules to that. So you can see that this has popped up. You're in CSS rule definition for header and styles.css. What happens if you click OK and you don't see that anymore? Well, you should remember you can always go back and double click on that rule, rule definition for whatever element you've put in here. Okay, you can choose the font that you would like to go inside that particular division tag right here. I'm not going to go over every one of these in this intro tutorial, but I'm going to show you the basics, probably the things that you'll use most often. So you'll see the font family, size, and everything, color. Background is pretty important. That gives you a color or lets you put in an image. So if I switch back here, this is where I put in a background image for this particular website. Okay, so I'll put in a background color so you can see that. Let me just put in blue or something that shows up nicely. Okay, there's the background for the blue. And then you do have options for image, background repeating, positioning for the background. All of those should be supported in recent versions of browsers. If you have run into an older version of a browser, it may not support some of these tags, so you kind of have to check. But you should be checking your browsers anyway, checking your websites. Okay, block, just kind of talks about the letter, word spacing, text, alignment, all of that. Box is an important one. That's where you define the size and the positioning of your elements. So, okay, if we want to do a width on here, we're going to do it in pixels. Let's do 400 so it's easy to see, and let's do 200 high. And then if you want to check these periodically while you're applying these rules, click Apply. You can see what's happened here. You actually start to get a little design to your page. So you can imagine now if you have these division tags and you start to define the rule definition for each division tag, you can place these kind of where you want. Now you don't have exact positioning with this CSS box model because it's really not supported in all browsers. There is something in Dreamweaver called layers that you can do that work okay. But for what I do, I'm developing a usable, accessible website with this box model. So what we do is we kind of float these boxes. You can do a left or right positioning, or you can do a design that's sort of more one after another on down the page. So you'd have a header and then a menu and then a box for your content. So there's a lot of options on there, but it's not exactly like Photoshop or Flash where you can position things exactly where you want them on the page. If you do that, you might run into some problems with browsers and the way that the sites are going to look. So I'm going to kind of give you a compromise to start out with, and then I'm going to show you some of the other ways you can develop pages also. But what we'll do here is we'll do in later tutorials float left and right. So that'll allow your division tag to kind of float left or right on your screen. And then we also might do what's called a container where all your division tags fit into that container. So we'll look at that. You can also add padding and margins on here. Margins we will use probably in the next tutorial that I will give you, and that's one that allows you to center your document. It's a nice way to design a website. So usually what I do is I set these margins to auto, but we'll come back to that later on. Border is also an important one. So we'll do style. You can see there's a same for all right here. So that kind of depends on your design. You don't have to have a border around the whole thing, but if you wanted to, you could. So I'll just do solid, and then you can set a width, or you can pick one of these right here. Let's pick thick on here, and then let's drop the color here with a blue and click apply. So the border is an important screen for you to look at right here. It is going to frame your files. Kind of what I did with mine here was I used a real thin border on this one, and then on this one I used a little thicker one here. And you can actually do the rounded corners. Some recommendations for rounded corners on these would be graphics. So to actually do that with a little graphic that you place in here, there is actually CSS that does rounded corners also. So we'll do, when we get into some more of the detailed tutorials on how to improve the look of your website, I'll kind of mention those different things to you. But what I do also, you probably noticed, is I give you a really solid foundation, and then you can go from there. I mean, there are a million things in this, in web graphic design and this field that you're probably not going to learn every single thing you need to from one class. So go out there on your own. The other thing I'll say about that is that if you're in this field, you'll be doing a lot of learning on your own anyway. Most of the stuff that I'm showing you, I learned it through training, online training, maybe conferences, but mainly just taught it to myself. So you'll be doing the same thing. So, but the border is important. These we won't use right now, like the list and positioning and extensions. We'll probably use some of those later on. But for most of the CSS that you'll be working with type, background, some with the block, not as much probably, and then box and border also. So those can get you a long way. Okay, so click OK, and you can see that's what we created. If we do a file preview in browser, save changes, you'll get these boxes here that says some files need to be saved. That's the CSS file, so click yes, and that's what it looks like in a browser. It's the start of the CSS box model. So if you want to come back and edit that, if you decide we don't like that color, just double click on it again, straight back to background, and let's change the color here. It's as easy as that. So this is your first introductory tutorial to CSS box model in Dreamweaver, kind of how that works. If you want to check out the CSS styles, I would recommend that you do that periodically to see how that's being written. This should look pretty familiar to you. You've got background, height, width. That I think I put in there. See, when I was just experimenting with some things, so you wouldn't worry about that right now. Okay, but same thing with that. But this is all that it takes really to build this little box right here. Background, height, width, and border, and that goes in the CSS styles panel. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'll kind of pick back up here, but I will maybe add in a couple more division tags and then some more simple formatting to kind of start to create a layout for a website. So that's it for this tutorial.